Throughout history, there have been countless moments when human life was regarded as disposable. Be it the war prisoners in Germany, multiple acts of terrorism, or simply cruel dictatorship, millions of lives have been lost in the most inhumane way possible. While no age group was specifically spared, small children were generally not the primary target and sometimes left to live. But that changed when one of the worst drug scandals surfaced in the late 1950s. Thousands of children lost their life, and thousands more were forced to live with the consequences. Parents were encouraged to strip their newborn babies of their life, and the outcome was so severe that it redefined the drug regulations into what we follow till this day. This is the story of thalidomide, which made the delivery room filled with terror and permanently ruined the lives of children that lived to tell their tale. When Japan agreed in principle to unconditional surrender on 14th of August 1945 and the Second World War officially came to an end, Germany had lost above 7 million lives including soldiers and civilians. While the Allied armed forces had been using penicillin to treat their wounded soldiers en masse, the Allied Control Council had prohibited the research and manufacturing of penicillin by German companies. After the war came to an end, the ban was lifted. Chemie Grunenthal was founded in 1946 and became the first company to introduce penicillin into the German market in the post-war period. The company was founded by Hermann Wirtz, a former Nazi Party member, and his twin brother who was supposedly an engineer. Being the sole manufacturer of penicillin, Grunenthal's sales and reputation went off the charts. With ample number of manpower and matching finances to back any research, the hunt for new drug was initiated. Under its head of research Heinrich Muchter, who was of course a former Nazi scientist, Grunenthal synthesized a drug in 1954, which was given the name thalidomide. At the moment, the drug wasn't developed to match any demand and hence didn't have much of a purpose, but it was intended to use as a tranquilizer or sedative. For reference, tranquilizer is a drug that calms your body, reducing stress and tension along the way. The company obtained 20-year patent for thalidomide and started manufacturing few batches for clinical trial. At this point, the company had multiple ex-Nazi members working for the research and development of new drugs. As if the group couldn't get any worse, the company hired Heinz Baumkotter, who was the concentration camp medical doctor for multiple locations and was responsible for punishments, shootings, gassings, and the list goes on. With no prior clinical testing on animals except rodents, the drug was directly tested on humans, company's employees to be precise. None of the rodents died even after consuming high doses of the drug, which was deemed a success, kick-starting the official production of thalidomide. The medicine was prescribed as a solution to a wide range of problems like cold, flu, nausea and morning sickness, making it highly applicable to a multitude of individuals. Their first product marketed the drug for the treatment of respiratory infections and cold under the trade name Gripex, which was a combination drug that contained thalidomide and other components. As outrageous as it might sound, researchers at Chemie Grunenthal also found that the drug was particularly effective for pregnant women suffering from morning sickness, although no trials were run with pregnant women. Accepting the vague conclusion from the Grunenthal's researchers, thalidomide was also administered on pregnant employees. On the Christmas of the year 1956, one of the employees from Grunenthal, who had been taking thalidomide, gave birth to a girl with no ears. As the mishap on the Christmas was first of its kind where deformity was observed in a newborn child, blaming the drug was out of the option. In 1957, the company rebranded thalidomide as Contergan and prescribed it as a sedative and medication for morning sickness. Within a short time, Contergan became an economic success. It was prescribed increasingly often and played an important role in self-medication. After a year, the consequences of taking thalidomide followed, with an unusual number of deformities reported among newborns in Germany. Thalidomide caused a wide array of disabilities in babies ranging from shortened or absent limbs to facial disfigurement or palsy and damage to the brain, internal organs, and skeletal structure. While few tests and trial for contergan would have revealed the culprit for these deformities, radioactivity was deemed the primary cause. The reasoning wasn't completely illogical, as politically, the 1950s were marked by the Cold War. The nuclear weapons testing conducted by both Eastern and Western powers persisted without any reduction or pause, which worried the population. Fear in the population was strengthened by the observations of the Beirut pediatrician Dr. Carl Beck, who wrote a book, with which he wanted to prove that the number of deformed children had tripled in the previous year compared to the past. He reduced the connection to a simple denominator. Whenever atomic bombs explode, embryos were damaged shortly afterwards in the area of the Franconian clinic, only to be born 7 to 8 months later as deformed children. Beck's research was proven false after a year, but it became a perfect unintentional decoy that was able to divert attention from thalidomide for a brief period. By 1959, thalidomide could be bought without prescription in Germany, and was hailed as a wonder drug. It was marketed aggressively in 46 countries with the guarantee that it could be given with complete safety to pregnant women and nursing mothers without any adverse effect on mother and child. Doctors prescribed it as a non-toxic antidote to morning sickness and sleeplessness, and contergan occupied a large chunk of the tranquilizer market in West Germany. But the drug was only seemingly free of side effects, to say the least. Contergan was responsible for damaging the nerves and affected the development of the embryo. Depending on the time of ingestion, it interfered with the formation of the extremities, skull, or internal organs. If vital organs were affected, the embryo couldn't survive, and if the thalidomide inhibited the development of the extremities, malformed children were born. Delivery ward in hospitals became nightmare, where more than 10,000 children were born with some form of deformities, and 2,000 newborns lost their life, not counting the miscarriages that resulted from consuming thalidomide. No one was prepared for the birth of thousands of deformed babies who had been affected by thalidomide while still in the womb. There were cases where the mothers were sedated before they could see the baby, and the baby would be taken to hospital in an ambulance accompanied by the father. It would be the responsibility of the fathers to tell the mothers that their child was born with no arms or legs. But the most common experience was for the mother to be presented with her swaddled child and left alone to unwrap. Finally, reports started to surface that the drug was toxic, with scores of adults suffering from peripheral neuritis damaging the nervous system. This was when corporate greed took its full form. As profits kept rolling in, Chemie Grunenthal suppressed that information, bribing doctors and pressuring critics and medical journals for years, where 60,000 letters were sent to German doctors to reassure them of its safety.
Die Tötungen, also der Mord an Tausenden an behinderten Menschen geplant und durchgeführt in solchen Einrichtungen. Und vor allen Dingen Kinder wurden mit grauen Bussen abgeholt. Man hat den Eltern vorher mitgeteilt, die Kinder kommen in ein spezielles Krankenhaus, da wird es ihnen gut gehen. Es ist nie rausgekommen, für die Eltern war es nie klar. Und was passiert ist mit diesen Kindern?
Somewhere along the lines, William Stanley Merrell, a Cincinnati pharmaceutical firm, quietly began distributing samples of an exciting new wonder drug in the United States, which was already popular around the world. Promoted as a risk-free sedative, thalidomide was distributed liberally under the guise of clinical trials by doctors who believed that FDA approval was imminent. It's impossible to find the exact volume of the drug that was distributed, but it was promoted by multiple salesmen who were providing manuals to doctors that provided information, assuring them of the safety of the drug, and reveals the presence of a physician sample promotion scheme rather than a bona fide investigational program. The company was eager to file a new drug application for thalidomide in September 1960, where the drug was to be released under the name Kevadon. The application landed on the desk of FDA medical reviewer Dr. Frances Kelsey, who had a doctoral degrees in both medicine and pharmacology. She knew that thalidomide can cross the placental barrier and harm an unborn baby, and hence rejected the report, questioning the safety of the drug. But the company kept on resubmitting the NDA several times without ever providing the information she sought. U.S. Food and Drug Administration had never approved thalidomide for sale in the United States, but the damage had already been done. By the time when reports started strongly suggesting that thalidomide was the reason behind deformities in 1960, more than 14 pharmaceutical companies were marketing thalidomide in 46 countries with more than 51 different trade names. As the evidence against thalidomide kept mounting, the manufacturer's position that it was not to blame became untenable. The drug was officially withdrawn by Chemie Grunenthal on November 26, 1961, and a few days later, the UK distributors did the same. In comparison, United States had a relatively low tragedy from thalidomide due to tireless effort of Dr. Kelsey to block its authorization in the United States and stop its sale around the world. According to the official report from FDA, 17 thalidomide babies were born in US, and more than 2.5 million doses of thalidomide were distributed to more than 1,200 US doctors. Even after Grunenthal was found guilty, the legal procedures were difficult to say the least. The company kept arguing that children's deformities were caused by everything from nuclear fallout to botched home abortions, anything but thalidomide. The trial was settled with the company's promise to provide millions of dollars for the victims, but the litigation continues with some survivors saying that the original settlement cannot cover the cost of their specialized needs.
Every doctor, every hospital, every nurse have been notified. Every woman in this country, I think, must be aware that it's most important that they check their medicine cabinet and that they do not take this drug, that they turn it in. Every citizen, of course, should be aware of the hazards, and I'm sure they are.
Thalidomide was officially banned. It felt like all the suffering finally came to an end. People could finally let out a sigh of relief as thalidomide baby would become a relic of past. But something happened in a few years that completely changed its course to grave. In 1964, Israeli physician Jacob Shishkin was responsible for handling leprosy patients and was looking for medications to suppress the disease. On one of his trials, he prescribed thalidomide as a sedative to a leprosy patient with Erythema Nodosum Leprosum, suffering from insomnia. The patient provided rapid and dramatic clinical response in the ENL symptoms with the use of thalidomide. While thalidomide babies were growing up with some having to amputate their limbs to use prosthetics, the drug that was supposed to be banned for good was being reintroduced. The outcome of Jacob's trial was enough evidence to start new research on thalidomide. In total, 6 studies were conducted, where 201 leprosy patients were studied with 192 exposed to thalidomide. The study size ranged from 10 to 92 patients, where more than 3 of these studies included postmenopausal women. All of the 6 studies reported that thalidomide therapy was effective in the amelioration of the signs and symptoms of ENL. The clinical responses were dramatic and nothing short of miraculous. Patients who hadn't responded well to steroids showed positive results with thalidomide within just a day or a week. Commercial production and distribution of thalidomide were banned since the trials in the early 1960s. However, Grunenthal delivered thalidomide tablets to leprosy clinics under strict conditions and through an agreement with the World Health Organization. Thalidomide got its biggest comeback moment in 1992, when ophthalmologist Robert D'Amato was conducting research into macular degeneration, which is an eye disease that can blur your central vision.
I started searching for drugs that cause some sort of damage to a fetus, a birth defect, and at the top of this list was thalidomide.
Dr. D'Amato was able to starve cells of blood flow using thalidomide, which was a potential solution to treating cancerous tumors. The discovery was commendable, as battling late-stage cancer is incredibly challenging, but a promise was made to the victims that thalidomide would never return to the shelves. Victims gathered, and a lengthy discussion ensued to decide whether thalidomide should ever be used again. Despite its infamous past, leprologists had over 30 years of experience using thalidomide for ENL. Dr. D'Amato's research became a plus point for thalidomide, showcasing the drug's potential in new treatments.
Thalidomide is back.
The Food and Drug Administration says thalidomide will be the most restricted drug ever distributed.
Since then, thalidomide has gone on to combat a surprising variety of diseases like tuberculosis, multiple sclerosis, and symptoms of HIV and AIDS. Despite the positive side of thalidomide in treating these diseases, it was still a big no for pregnant women. While it was approved by FDA in 2006 to treat multiple forms of myeloma, rigorous safety measures are applied where patients were made fully aware about the potential side effect of the drug, and women were made sure to use multiple forms of birth control, ensuring no chance of pregnancy while using thalidomide. In August 2012, the company issued its first apology in 50 years, saying it regretted the consequences of the drug. Harold Stock, who was the chief executive of Chemie Grunenthal, admitted that the company had failed to personally connect with the victims and their mothers over the past 50 years.
We ask for forgiveness that for nearly 50 years we didn't find a way of reaching out to you from human being to human being. Instead, we've been silent, and we're very sorry for that.
The apology was nothing short of an insult to the thalidomide victims. A company that made millions from a drug that ruined thousands of innocent lives, saying that it took them 50 years to apologize has to be one of the most egregious failures to date. Numerous victims complained that the apology was insincere, and the fact that the company has refused to compensate the Spanish victims of the drug who have sued the company shows how apologetic they really are. Despite thalidomide being restricted to a few medical conditions and strictly banned for pregnant women, a terror unfolded in Brazil. Examining birth records of 17.5 million babies born between 2005 and 2010, researchers found 100 children with birth defects linked to thalidomide exposure. The cases were concentrated in areas with the heaviest use of thalidomide to treat leprosy. It was a huge disappointment as the victims were promised that the history wouldn't repeat itself. But these cases were the last of it. As of now, no new cases of thalidomide baby has been reported. Due to the deformities of their body, the thalidomide babies that grew older were afraid if their offspring would develop similar defects. The fear was replaced with a sigh of relief as many thalidomide survivors started having children, and because their own disabilities do not have a genetic cause, it meant that the defect itself won't be passed on to future generations. The story of thalidomide teaches us the importance of drug safety testing and the fact that there are drugs which are waiting for a disease to fight against. As of today, thalidomide and its derivatives are still being used to treat myeloma, leprosy and bacterium that causes tuberculosis. While it seems like a happy ending for thalidomide, the terror that remains from its consequences suggests something else.